Welcome, everybody. My name is Brittany Carambio. I'm the Director of Corporate Marketing here at Egnyte, and I am joined by Jason Ozin of PIB Group. So welcome, Jason.
Hi Brittany.
Jason, could you introduce listeners to PIB Group, your background, and your role as Group Information Security Officer?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Group Information Security Officer at PIB Group. So I'm responsible at group level for information security, cybersecurity, data governance, and compliance for a City of London insurance business. That's PIB Group. So we're a growing insurance advisory business. We launched in 2015, and we've grown through rapidly. We've grown rapidly through acquisitions and organic growth. I think we started with 12 members of staff. We're now at over 1,400. So we pride ourselves in employing outstanding individuals with loads of background knowledge, loads of experience, and we're now based in over 40 locations across the UK, as well as Guernsey, Germany, and Ireland, with more acquisitions on the way.
Fantastic. That's a great overview. Appreciate that. You mentioned data governance and a couple of other related things. Do you mind sharing what are some of your main responsibilities as CISO and DPO? So what are the things that you work to stay in front of, or that you have kept you up at night in the past? These are definitely some things that other security officers and DPOs out there listening to will be able to relate to. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that looks like for you at PIB Group.
Yeah, sure. So my one main responsibility is to keep our data and our clients' data secure. I mean, that's effectively everything I have to do. And interesting, you mentioned, what keeps me up at night. I've got one rule, and that is I don't want to be kept up at night or woken up at night with some emergency call. And we do that, or I do that, my department does that, to make sure that we have got great partners in place and great teams in place at those partners. So we outsource a lot of our security work and a lot of our platforms. And if I know I've got the right partners in place, it means I've got less worry and less sleepless nights. So I think there's four things a CISO needs in order to sleep well. One is, as I said, a trusted business platform partners. And then, as important as that is great next generation behavioral based endpoint protection. And with that, you want a 24/7 sort of security information center who can deal with alerts that come out of that. Patching is really important. And then I think equally important nowadays, if you look at all the breaches that have taken place, is two-factor authentication on every login, wherever you can. So they're my sort of rules for keeping me asleep at nights.
Well, I'm glad you're thinking about that, and I'm glad you're getting good rest. Very, very important. So you did mention before we started recording here that PIB Group has gone from 12 employees to over 1,400 employees in the last few years, and you mentioned that there are even more acquisitions on the way. M&A is a really big use case for many of our customers. So what sort of challenges does M&A pose for your team in terms of managing data governance and information security for those acquired companies? And I think it'd be really good to just hear sort of what role that plays in your data governance strategy, and what are some of the unique challenges that you have to think about?
We were lucky. We made the right choices early on. So we're primarily cloud first, and we found the right cloud partners. So we have a core set of platforms that we migrate our acquisitions to if we can and when the time is right. And Egnyte's a big part of that. Our IT migration teams, they go in and they'll move the acquired data from whatever it is they're on, use some old file server in the corner somewhere or something like that, and then move it into the Egnyte ecosystem, where we can then look at the data to a greater extent. So we're trying to move it off the legacy platforms as soon as possible. The great thing, though, is that the end users tend to remain happy, because Egnyte can be presents their data in the same way they're used to, as a file share or as a web share or however they're used to doing it. Egnyte is flexible enough to do that for us. So Egnyte is a very big part of our M&A process.
So Jason, this year's obviously brought about so many new challenges for businesses, particularly for those who are now working remote outside of the walls of the office, trying to maintain a level of security and control over data and how folks are working, how they're sharing information. It's really a different world for many companies. Can you talk about the strategies that you've employed for information security and protecting against these growing threats? Like ransomware, insider threats, the complicated world of compliance and regulation, all of these things. How has the COVID-19 pandemic or remote work more broadly played a role in that?
So once again, we were lucky. Lucky, we planned well. The move to 100% home working at times, it was hard work logistically, but we had a great start because, as I said before, we're ostensibly cloud first. So it meant that we had everything actually in place to hit the ground running. We had some logistical stuff that we had to deal with around, getting the hardware, getting additional laptops for employees and things like that. But in terms of our platforms, things were in place for that. So take Egnyte as an example. We had already protected Egnyte by partnering it with our single sign-on products. So it makes it easy. It means people can log into it from unusual locations, and we know we're secure because we're using our SSO and our two-factor authentication to get into Egnyte. So it plugged in very well with that. So we had that extra level of security in place, and people could work from home really quite quickly. Couple that with our really great endpoint protection that we've got in, and we didn't struggle anywhere near as hard as some of my peers did.
So Jason, you mentioned a few times that you've already been a cloud-first organization for some time. You've been using Egnyte for a number of years, which has been a helpful element of your transition to remote work and sort of thinking about data governance and in M&A. So we definitely appreciate the benefits of kind of a cloud-first strategy. But I know that you are now starting to onboard Egnyte for some governance functions as well, and it's still early days there. But can you talk a little bit about sort of what was the decision process for bringing data governance into your organization? Sort of what did you see as the opportunity there? So why was looking at your data from a governance perspective and a security perspective important right now, and sort of what drove you to that decision?
Yeah, so we started using Egnyte. So the thought process went like this. We needed to have greater visibility of the type of data that we were holding and how it was being accessed. We've got a lot of data from acquisitions and from our business processes. We wanted more MI, more meaning around that, and being able to understand exactly what we had. We also wanted, and this was very important, to be alerted to unusual activity. Insider threats or insider mistakes, if you like, it is a big issue, and we're already leveraging that really well. Egnyte giving us those alerts, and we're looking at those, and it's been really useful exercise, that bit. Ultimately, what we want to do with Egnyte is to categorize our data so that we understand what sorts of data we got into what sort of places and what happens to it, how that then leaves our organization, or we stop it leaving our organization, or at least get alerted to it leaving our organization. So once we've been a few months down the line, we're going to start the categorization process.
Well, one final thought, I'd love for you to leave our audience with just kind of a piece of advice. So what would you say to your peers who are maybe at the beginning of this process, thinking through their own data governance strategies, thinking about secure remote work, maybe dealing with issues around M&A as well? If you had just kind of one parting thought, one piece of advice that you would impart, what would that be?
So, you know what, I'd say start as you mean to go on. Set a strategy, stick to it. So don't let business drivers let you compromise simplicity, privacy, and security, because you'll live to regret it. It doesn't mean you can't be flexible or you can't be forward thinking, but there's basics around data governance and they have to remain the same. So think about structure and manageability. have a plan for the future. Imagine yourself in 6 years' time looking at this big bucket of data and wondering how you manage it. Start managing it early on, because the earlier you start and the earlier you start putting a structure in place, the better it's going to be. So, you know, I think going back to your sleepless nights question, and bring it onto this as well, you know, you'll thank yourself in the future when you realize that you can take 2 weeks off in the Caribbean and have a holiday and everything is managing itself and your team's managing it and they don't desperately need you. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Well, we look forward to the days in the near future where that's something that we can all do. So Jason, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate your insight. And once again, thanks for being an Egnyte customer. And we look forward to having more conversations like this in the future.
It's been a pleasure.